Vicious again, got hot again. She got hot, 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 hot again. Got to be a hot skeleton in the latest hot fashion. Got to be a hot feminist turning into a hot cultural investigative gadfly. Got hot, got hot. She got hot, she got hot. She got hot and got like a hot exile flying into alcoholic
Get Amber Rose,
tantrums
come on,
on
get
hot
it.
buses. Got hot, got hot.
Too late.
Got hot, she got hot,
Here's
she
that
got sad, she got hot, she got crazy, she got hot, she got athletic, she got hot, she got impatient, she got...
Hey everybody, this is Al with friends. We're here for the last time under the tent. I think for the last time. Next week we'll be in the Arts Cafe. Don't jinx it, dude. But we're going to be in the Arts Cafe tonight, and I'm going to get to that in a second when I introduce the people around. But we're ready. We're going to talk about the beats, or we're really going to talk about anything you want. The number is 610-616-3208. I have a feeling, Emily Rush, take pictures of this event because, take a picture of me right now. Take a picture. Because we're going to get an overwhelming response from people. Everybody's very excited about this webcast. A lot of people are watching across all the time zones. So I'm going to introduce some pals who are here. First of all, special pals who came for this specially and who have other things they're doing during the day. First of all, Angela Carr, snaps and claps. Angela, snap. We have to snap for poets. I'm too cold to snap. So Angela's here for the day. We're so happy that she's here. And she's going to be doing, she's going to be in on a Poem Talk episode about Divya Victor, a poem that's already in a ModPo, but it isn't Poem Talk yet. So we're kind of covering all our bases. Thank you in advance for doing that. And she'll be going into the studio to record some new and old poems for her Pen Sound page. And she will be then hanging around for a reading tonight I'll mention in a second. So, and we also have a copy of one of Angela's books. It's called Here and There. This is an extra copy that I bought for today that I read last year around this time, a little afterwards, and loved it. And this is going to be the first book we're giving away to the first caller. Did we get a call yet, Amber Rose? No call yet. 610-616-3208. This is, you're going to get Here and There by Angela Carr. Angela, thank you so much for coming. Does your mic work?
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you are so welcome. And another special guest, Rae Armentrout. This is Rae Armentrout just to my right. Snaps and claps for Rae Armentrout. Allie's snapping in New York, and Dave is snapping in Arizona, and people are snapping in New Zealand. Rae is just a huge favorite. Is that the right word? She's probably in ModPo and ModPo Plus more than any other poet. Don't tell Ron. Rae is, she's like Zelig, because she appears in the Whitmanian Dickinsonian chapter, then she appears in the Rise of Imagism chapter because of her interest in what they were doing, especially early in her career, and then she's appropriate for chapter 9.1, which is week 8, because of the so-called language poets. So she's everywhere. Rae, hello.
Hi.
Welcome back.
How come it's not the so-called imagist poets, but it's the so-called language poets?
Oh, you got me. Zap! She's here 5 fucking minutes, and already she's taken over. That's great. And Rae was a Writers' House Fellow, and this is probably her 5th or 6th visit to the Writers' House over the years, since the 90s, and we're so happy to have you back.
Thank
and
you.
Hello to, and also Rae and Chuck, who's sitting in the sun and is wearing sunglasses he doesn't get to use in Seattle. Get a little glimpse of Rae. Did I say Rae? Rae Bands. Chuck. Ray's over here. Hi, Chuck. Welcome. So Rae and Chuck are going to do Philadelphia things, and then Rae is going to be giving a reading at 6 p.m., and we are going to be streaming that live. Not on this channel, though. I'm going to send out another link. It's to the KWH TV channel. Is that correct, Zach and Chris? And that event is going to be the first event in the newly renovated Arts Cafe, and the second caller will receive, we already did this once, so would you mind signing last week's recipient, or 2 weeks for Montreal? She already did. And then this one, and this will go out to the second caller. This is Wobble. It's a great book. I'm not going to take any more time and read my favorite poem, but 6 p.m. tonight, you can watch it. we're not going to take questions or anything, but you can watch it. So fantastic. Okay, Davey, hello.
Hey.
Hey. Lily.
Hello.
Hey. Anna.
Hey.
Amber Rose is on the phone. Hey.
We also
And we
caller
have
when you're ready.
what?
We have someone on the phone.
Fantastic.
When
We'll
you're ready.
get to that in a second. We have Connie. Mandana came from New York. Yay, Mandana. This is Mandana. Hi, man. Next to her pal, Jason. And Susan is here. And Jamie is here. We have Allie in New York. Hey, Allie.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. I wish I was.
Are you in Newark or New York right now?
I'm in Brooklyn.
You're in Brooklyn. I'm sorry. I said New York. I
I'm
should
in
know
New York.
better. You're in New York, but really in Brooklyn. Erica in the Hudson Valley. Erica Kaufman, a wonderful poet,
Hello.
critic, teacher in her own right. Hello. And Dave Poplar is in Arizona, coming to us live from the Grand Canyon. Hey, Dave.
Good morning.
Oh, they brought books to the Grand Canyon. How cool. Did somebody put caffeine in this coffee? This is dangerous. Here's some shout outs, and then we're going to get started with the caller. All right? First of all, there's a great thread on Anne Waldman's Write, R-I-T-E. It's a new poem in ModPo Plus, and there's a study group that's just talking about that poem. I recommend it. It's called Global Study Group Discovers Anne Waldman. The second thread I want to pitch is Becky Alyala's thread on Rae Armentrout's poem The Way, which nobody understands, but we try hard. I mean, I think I do. But and it's all about, here's the small gasp. It's all about that idea of the gasp. And this thread continues on, and Elaine Ruth White, one of the participants in this conversation, says she struggled with the poem, but that she has figured out how to reckon with that poem through this out-of-control thread, discussion thread, which is global. So how about that? It takes a village to read a poem, at least to read a Rae Armentrout poem.
I want to see that.
Yeah. The third thread I want to shout out to is called What Are You Reading Right Now? This is just crowdsourcing, classic ModPo crowdsourcing. It has had 12,000 views and 249 contributors. Wow. It gives one hope, I think, depending on the schlock that they're reading. I haven't actually looked too closely, but assuming... No, that was really rude. Whatever you're reading is good, because you're reading. 249 people are saying they're reading something. That's 249 people more than I woke up this morning thinking we're reading. And then final shout out, Jean Dana, who has expressed, I don't mind saying, Jean Dana, who has expressed just general overwhelmingness about being in ModPo. She wants to do everything. She wants to read all the poems. She wants to watch all the videos. I suggest that you don't try that. Just do what you can in ModPo. She wrote an essay on HD's The Garden. It's a great essay. In that essay, she noticed something I neglected to see, which was that HD uses the word break 4 times in this short poem, and the word heat 4 times, and she discusses the relationship between break and heat, which is not, except sonically, something you would do naturally. It's a great essay, and really the reason I'm shouting out to it, other than encouraging Jean to feel like she can do ModPo any way she likes, is to applaud everybody who came to that thread, who read and wrote about that essay, and it is now up to 25 comments. So Jean Dana, who's worried about kind of how she's going to do ModPo, wrote a great essay on HD and has gotten 20 colleagues from around the world to attend to it. This is much more attention, I dare say, than anyone gets by writing an essay at a college or university for which you pay $50, $60, and now $70,000 a year. ModPo is free, and you can get 20 readings. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the phone and get started. Oh, you know what I'm going to do? Here we go. I'm just going to read the poems that we're talking about this week because I know everybody's going to get sidetracked and we're not going to talk about them. All right. Ginsberg's Howl, Part 1. Some Kerouac prose on spontaneous prose. Kerouac's October in the Railroad Earth. Bob Kaufman's Jail Poems. Robert Creeley's I Know a Man, which is kind of an anti-beat poem maybe. Anne Waldman's Rogue State, which we're going to probably play today. Amiri Baraka's Incident, which seems to be a reply to County Cullen's Incident. Jane Cortez, She Got, He Got, which is what we opened with. And in ModPo Plus, some Ferlinghetti, we can ignore if you want. Clark Coolidge on jazz. Edwin Torres, Dude Descending a Staircase. Dude Descending a Staircase. Maggie Estep, spoken word poet. Helen Adam, amazing. Frank Lima's Plena, Elise Cowan, Ruth Weiss, Bob Kaufman's Crudy Sango, Joanne Kiger, When I Used to Focus on the Worries, some Philip Whalen, and some Gary Snyder. Just hoping we stay somewhat on those rails, but who knows? Okay, Amber Rose, who do we got?
Okay, I hope Sophia is still with us, but on the phone is Sophia Naz.
Yeah.
Oh, my
Yes,
goodness.
who was very excited that she finally got through. She said she's been a long-time ModPo person. She's very excited that Rae is here and has a question for us and is the first caller, so gets the book. Woo!
Hi, Sophia.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great
You
here in California.
Yeah, I know exactly
And
where you
it's
are. You're
really
in wine
exciting.
country.
Wine country, yeah.
And
I'm talking to you from my trailer. And yeah, I'm in a
So-
trailer. You know, we lost our house in
Yeah.
the fires. It's been 1 year.
yeah, you
And-
called us last year right after your house was burned.
That's right.
Yeah.
I got through then too, yeah.
And you know,
So-
Sophia, I have a surprise for you. I have two surprises. First of all,
Wow.
the ModPo team is coming to San Francisco again. And I haven't told my colleagues yet, but on the evening of January 16th, we're arriving, and then we're going to go up to San Francisco, and we're going to do a meetup. And the last time we did a meetup there, you came.
Yes.
We
I'm
met.
excited. That is amazing.
So the second surprise is that we're going to use one of your poems, because you sent me a book, or I bought a book of yours, and we're going to do one of your
Yes.
poems as a ModPo Minute.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. And I actually have published 2 more books since then, which I'm about to get copies of, and I wanted to send you those.
Please do.
Wow. But maybe I'll
Please
need
do.
to give them to you.
Well, no, don't give us. Just send me a link, and I will buy them, because you deserve whatever proceeds you get.
They're very hard to get.
I got the last one, I
On
think.
well, I know, but these were both. One was published in India,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have. Neither of them have international distribution.
Wow.
One was published in Pakistan. One was published in India.
Yeah.
Pointillism and date palms.
Yes.
But so I will send them to you or bring them.
Okay. And the poem that we're going to talk about is this. It's a habeas corpus poem. Do you remember that one?
Yes.
It's very
Yes, I do.
political, very
Yes,
feminist,
yes.
very pro-immigration, I guess I want to say.
Yes, yes.
So anyway, the last surprise is not a surprise, because we told you. I'm going to have Angela inscribe this to Sophia. Do you prefer Naz or Pandea?
Yes, since my mom passed away and lots of things happened, I decided to use the name, my middle name, that my mother had given me by breaking off a piece of her own name, because her name was Shahnaz. So this is always, and it has been my Urdu poetic name.
Great.
I decided to use that as my author name, rather than either my father's given name or my father's last name or husband's last name. So
Okay.
feminist break. So now I have a matronymic.
Yes.
as my
Sophia
author
Naz.
and my
Snaps
name.
for Sophia
Yeah,
Naz,
Sophia Naz.
everybody. And for matronymity. Okay, Sophia, we've been. So it's time to ask a question. What would you like to do?
Yes, my question is about actually about Rae Armentrout's poetry. Is it that okay? I know
It's
that-
totally okay. Ray's
Rae-
here. I knew this was going to happen.
Well, I'm just wondering, her poems seem to be like almost like anti-poems. They're just like I was reading an essay and they are related to what the ancient Greeks called palinodes, poems that take back or they push against the idea of poetry that's full of self-importance. So I'm just wondering, does she look at her poetry like that? How does this, there's a poem of hers that goes, little golden self-measuring extents. So is she trying to, is that the crux of it? It's just like disruption of the whole idea of poetry as a an exercise in self-importance?
Hey,
I guess
Sophia,
that's my question.
you've been referring to Rae in the third person, but you're out right now. You're actually going to start talking with her, and here she is.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh!
Hi.
Hi.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that I like poetry and I don't want to destroy it. But I take your point about the self-importance of poetry, that kind of inflation of the ego, that sort of inflated tone that some poets use when they read, the breathy tone.
Poetry voice.
Yeah, poetry voice, where everything is given, fairly ordinary words or are sometimes said as if they, had a tremendous nimbus of importance around them. And, I am a bit allergic to that. But, I mean, if the line that you quoted, little self-measuring golden, am I probably saying it wrong? Little golden self-measuring extents. You probably would never find that phrase anywhere except in a poem, right?
Right.
And that phrase within the poem, I think, had something to do with the blackbird calls, but also it could be seen as a kind of description of a poetic line, maybe.
Yeah. I would like, Sophia, to ask Angela Davey and Erica Kaufman to widen the question a little and respond to the whole question of why is it that so much of the poetry, the usual phrase I use to try to escape from getting angry letters, is the poetry we admire? But what I mean is the poetry that a lot of people around the Writers' House consider the important poetry, the poetry we want to read, the poetry we admire. Why is so much of it working at that spot where it doesn't want to be poet voice poetic, but it's not really anti-poetic, because Rae's first response was correct, which is that she likes poetry, even though there is partly a stance that opposes what has always passed for poetry. Angela, Davey, Erica, can you just add a word to that?
Well, I think this connects to a lot of the readings that were on the syllabus for today,
The
right?
beats.
Right,
Oh,
the
she gets us
anti-formalism.
back.
Yeah.
Come anytime you like.
Yeah, so obviously the work that Rae is doing is very different from what they were doing, but we all share this love of language and, maybe not just boredom, but maybe stronger feelings about conventions and formalities and tradition, right?
Yeah.
So, which are always embedded in language if we use it the way it's always been used. So,
Right.
yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Davey, your thought on this?
Just to echo Angela, that's totally perfect to me. But thinking about a poem like Rogue State, that it's defamiliarization as a mode of thank you, mode of dealing with the urgency of the present. I'm trying to think about how do we make language feel like it's part of the present that it's narrating when we necessarily have the same words to describe different social and economic and cultural moments, and we need those words again and again. And so like a poem like Rogue State dealing with language of war, dealing with language of like neo-colonial projects and trying to think about, this is about now. This is about legacies, but this is also about now. How do we make this language weird enough that we feel it now and can talk about the now that's happening?
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Erica, a thought on this?
I would echo what both Davey and Angela said, and thinking about the work that poetry can do that other genres perhaps can't do, and how poetry helps us to really focus our attention on language and how language can change or might be malleable depending on the way that you use the specific unit of the word.
Yeah, beautiful. Sophia, are you still there?
Yeah,
So what do you think?
I am.
Yeah, what do you think about all this? Did we lose you?
Hello?
Yeah, hi.
I think I lost.
But you're back now.
Yes. Wow. I'm
Did we lose you again? Okay. Sophia, if you'll hear a recording of this later, so why don't you hang up and send a note to the thread and we'll read it, or to the Facebook page. Thank you. Yeah.
And also email someone. Oh, we'll contact her.
Yes,
Okay, we'll
we're going to
contact
send you a
for the
copy of this
address.
book. Thank you, Sophia, and we'll see you in San Francisco. Okay, 610-616-3208. I'm going to play the first part of Rogue State, which got mentioned, and then I'd like to see what's going on in the forums. Anna's doing the forums, Davey's doing Twitter, Lily's got Facebook, and let's see what happens after Ann Waldman intervenes. She did this performance here at the Writers' House.
Rogue state. I'm in a rogue state, honey. Getting unpredictable and strange.
Amber Rose,
Just
Amber Rose.
a rogue
Come on, Zach,
state
you're missing
itching
Amber Rose.
To test my Harridan Bardic
Zach.
range. Ours for the radical ecologist on the fringe.
Come on, Amber Rose.
Oh, is the opportunity to make first war powers cringe.
Only off
G
camera.
is the genius hacker under alien skin. You better watch out. Every female activist's akin. I'm in a rogue state, Papa Ashcroft. Don't tell me what to
John Ashcroft, Attorney General.
do. Your rules aren't my rules, 'cause I'm the lady of misrule. Wild card they call me, imperious sultry dark, loose cannon on the gunnel. This literary cannon's got a subversive quark. National Missile Defense System got nothing on me. I can pierce through the Genome Project with a cyborg's vitality. Gated communities tremble. I'm a coming through the door. Rogue states, a state won't humble. Call her witch. Call her whore. I'm in a rogue state, bushy. Don't tell me what to do. Your rules aren't my rules, 'cause I'm the lady of misrule. Rogue state.
Not from yet.
Rogue state. Rogue state.
Before we check in on Twitter and Facebook and maybe the forums, I just want to ask maybe Jason and Lily and Dave to say something very brief each about the use of misrule there. Because we think about poetry, particularly rhyme, ballad-like poetry such as that. You know, in this week, Waldman and Helen Adam are the two who are doing that, which, you know, in the context of the beats with the long lines and the blank verse and all that, you think, whoa, wait, they're returning to old forms. But the idea of being misrule in the middle of rules of rhyming and meter, what does it mean? Lily, would you riff on misrule? There's a lot going on there.
Excuse me. In the context of this poem being specifically of Rogue State, specifically female, I can't remember if it's female or feminist activists, either one of those terms, I just can't remember which one, are being called. When I then hear misrule, I hear miss as in MISS rule. And so to me, those specifically like a feminine, a conflation of feminist activism, rule by women, but also rule by women that goes against the convention.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Jason, did I ask you to comment on this?
Yes. Part of we were talking just before about certain ways of delivering poems. And here, this is perhaps harkens back to other ways of reciting poetry, but here we can't, but the meanings of the words and the sounds of the words and their intonations are all working together to undo any sort of conventional thought one might have made out of rule-based language.
Yeah, that's so perfectly put. Work together to undo. That's the paradox in a nutshell. Dave Poplar, a thought on this?
It's interesting because this whole poem is a complaint against being ruled improperly, being the misrule of the system, and by being the lady of misrule, she is basically reappropriating that and taking back that power.
Yeah. Yes, perfectly put. Thank you, all three. Okay, Anna, anything in the forums you want to cite, a question or a comment?
Dude, I can't even pick. There's so many good ones.
Okay, pick one.
Yeah. Well, first, Lisa Smallest Leaf says, very excited to see Angela Carr on the webcast today. Welcome, Angela.
Yay.
So, little shout out to Angela. But TA Jake Marmer has a question from his students.
Okay, so in Palo Alto, Jake teaches a class they're all using ModPo. So the whole class is in ModPo, and here's their question.
Yeah. Jake writes, we're reading Jane Cortez's poem, She Got, He Got, and had a question about it. Seems like both she and he arrive at their polar opposite experiences, hot and cold, because of the same reason. Nobody said, I'll love you forever, baby. The class is wondering about their respective reactions to the lack of affirmation. Why is she getting hot or is he getting cold? If the action is the same, what makes the reaction different? Is this a commentary on gender expectations?
That's really cool. Amber Rose, can you start on that? You've thought about this poem a lot. I don't know if that's putting you too much on the spot. And then, are you familiar enough with the thing that we started with, the Jane Cortez, to make a comment, Rae? No. Okay. And then we'll go to Davy and then Mandana. Okay. Amber Rose, your thought on this?
You were looking at me. I thought you were asking if we had a caller. That's what I was saying yes to.
Oh, and we do have a caller?
We do have a caller.
Okay. Caller, you're going to get wobble, but you have to hold on.
Philip, I hope you're still there. Okay. But a thought. Yeah, first of all, that's a great question.
There's like an intense close-up on you right now, by the way.
Oh my gosh, is there really?
Yeah.
Oh.
You look good.
Oh, thanks, Lily. Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm really excited to hear what other people think because I want to sit with it for a little bit. But my first thought is that I think, it's important to parse out how we describe, the ways that we describe gendered behavior as just what it is, like we are wired differently or something because of our gender, as opposed to thinking about the ways that we are taught to behave as gender appropriate. So I think what they're picking up on is that those kinds of like
the kids
hot and
in the
cold,
class, you mean?
yeah, the kids in the in the class are picking up on perhaps the way we've been socialized both to behave and to expect certain genders to behave. Yeah, that's all I want to say.
Okay. So, Mandana, your thought on this? I mean, what is Cortez's stance on the binarism of what he does and gets and what she does and gets?
I'm looking at it a little bit differently. I think to some extent it also shows the arbitrary nature of language, because you could have put any two words in there, any opposites, any binaries.
You mean on the conventional gender divide, you could put any words?
No, in terms of hot and cold. So it's arbitrary that she used hot and cold. She could have used anything else. And that, it makes the poem a little exciting for me because I consider what it could be with a different set of words.
Right.
But if you look at what the words mean, they both mean good things and bad things.
Yeah.
So for me, I take that out to some extent and say, what can you say if you don't use binaries?
Yeah.
Because also the repetition of the words makes them less and less meaningful as words.
Yes, that's a good point about the result of the effect of the repetition. I want to invite Davey to comment on this, and then Allie Castleman, and then we'll take the call. So, Davey, what are your thoughts?
Expanding on Amber Rose's thought, something that's always important to me about this poem is the sequence in which we get emotions. So she got bored, she got hot, she got frigid, she got hot, and that for...
Read a couple more lines.
She got harassed, she got hot, she got depressed, she got hot, she got angry, she got hot, in a way that for...
So what's the relationship? There's no cause and effect relationship between the harassed and the hot?
No, I think it's a question of legibility. I think it's a question of a critique of the behavior of folks who use female pronouns, maybe we'll call them women, if that's useful to you, that those folks are expressing emotion and their emotion is being read as anger. That's not what's happening in the other case. He got happy before he got cold. He got fed before he got cold. He got excited before he got cold. That this is a critique of uneven degrees of social legibility, of just like whose behavior do we have room for, whose behavior is read as gendered in a way that makes it illegible and unjustifiable as behavior.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Allie, before we turn to you for a final thought on this, can we go around the table and just riff on the word hot as it's being used here? Hot. Can you translate it, paraphrase it, give us synonyms?
Hot is in angry.
Lily?
Fiery, so a little bit dangerous.
Mhm. Ray? Sexy, yeah. I mean, I was waiting for somebody to get to that. So, and also I think that Jane Cortez is managing a performance that we would describe as hot in traditional media studies sense. You know, there's a way in which some politicians who are very hot in the public forum, people on the stump, right? Jesse Jackson famously is thought of as a hot performer in that sense. The media is warm to him, but then when he's on television, it doesn't work for him. Hot in that sense, along with the sexy thing. Davey, hot?
Impatient?
Quick-tempered.
And that has to do with the way the performance works with DiNardo, her son, symbolically, Freudianly, in every which way, behind her setting the beat, but also following her. Angela, hot?
Well, also emotional, so in contrast to the gendered indifference of coldness, right?
Yeah.
So that whole range of emotions from anger to desire, right?
Yeah.
All of that.
Right. Thank you all. Okay, Allie, you get the final thought on this, and then we're going to take the call.
I also just want to, I tend to, one reading of the word hot that sticks out to me when I listen to this is hot as in current. I think I just have like A Star is Born on my mind right now.
Did you like that movie?
I did. I enjoyed it. Anyway, but just hot as in popular in some sense, or like on the rise. And I think that that's an interesting complication to throw into these different connotations of that word.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested in what Mandana was saying about words losing their meanings here, and hot and cold kind of losing their meanings when they're juxtaposed with things that are often in conflict with those descriptors. And I am not sure if the poem does this, but I like the idea of, or the performance, but I like the idea of applying that wobbling of meaning to the gender pronouns as well.
That what of meaning?
Just like inconsistency shifting. Because I think the gender pronouns are slightly more invisible in the poem. And so we're kind of more, it's easier to say like, oh, hot and cold is what's, like that's what's losing their meaning. Whereas, I don't know, I'm interested in kind of extending that to the whole
God, you said a bunch of amazing things. And one of the amazing things you said is that the gendered pronouns become more invisible. I just think in the years in which we've done this discussion, this particular week of this course, I think the discourse around this poem is changing. Has anybody else noticed that? I mean, the previous conversations have all been about what he does to she and how she responds to he. And here now we're talking about this very pronoun heavy, like what percentage of the words in the poem are pronouns?
Well, think if she got hot, 33.5%, right?
33.5%. Thank you, Lily.
Or whatever, 33.
Lily, by the way, she moonlights as a statistician. Did you just do this?
Yes.
I'm not sure that's the appropriate response to moonlighting as a statistician, but anyway.
It's like, who, me?
Who, me? She moonlights as a rocket scientist. Yeah, it's amazing to think about how many words were expended that are pronouns, and yet here Allie is saying, plausibly, and everybody is saying, yes, that's right, that there's a certain invisibility starts to occur. What an achievement. Okay, we're going to go to the phone. The number for whoever's going to call next is 610-616-3208, and this person gets a copy of the brand new It Smells Like a Wesleyan University Press book, and I have an announcement to make that this book wobble is a finalist for this teeny weeny prize called the National Book Award. Rae Armentrout, everybody, finalist, and whoever's on the phone is going to get a copy of it inscribed by the future National Book Award winner. Did we just jinx it?
No.
Okay. All right. Anyway, who's on the phone?
Philip Drexler.
Philip. Hi, Phil.
Hello.
Hi.
I get a book from Rae Armentrout?
You do indeed. You do indeed.
That is wonderful.
Great.
I'm ecstatic. I love Rae Armentrout.
Hey.
I called to ask her a question.
Great. Phil, before you ask her a question, I'm going to ask Rae if she doesn't mind. We didn't plan this in advance. Would you read a poem that I request from this book?
Of course.
Okay. It's called Alone. It's very short in 3 parts.
Is this the one that you were saying is your favorite one?
It's one that I'm going to quote tonight in my introduction to you.
Okay. All right. Alone. Because we ate, you thought, we sinned and we would die like other creatures. To arrive at an idea as if at a town with long established, if obscure, customs. Pioneer Villa Diesel stands alone.
Rae Armentrout. Yeah, reading Alone. Okay, Phil, fire your question away, and then we're going to make way for the next questioner and look to the Twitter feed. Phil, can't wait to hear this.
Okay, Hal. What time is that broadcast tonight?
6 o'clock, and I will send to everyone the link to KWH-TV. But the short way to get there is go to the Writers House website and look for the link to KWH-TV.
Good deal. A couple of things I wanted to mention right before I ask my question. I spoke to Amber Rose, of course, on the phone, and I told her that she is a very intelligent and sensitive young lady. I would refer to her as the Allie Castleman of the newer PAs.
Oh, my gosh. Well, I'm applauding that. Though Allie's heard that. I guess, Allie, you've passed the torch or something.
Yes, that's what I say.
Okay.
And
Anyway,
also, I just wanted
thank
to
you.
say
Amber Rose is appreciative.
Yeah, I also just wanted to say I saw Mandana's smiling face on the camera, and I don't think I've seen her so far, so I just wanted to say
This
hello
gives
to
us a
Mandana.
chance to thank, and she hates this, but to thank and praise
I know
Mandana.
she does, but I had to do it because I haven't seen her yet this year, and I just had to say hello.
Phil,
But
let me just, before you ask your question of Rae, Mandana has worked so hard, not just in convening the New York group, but just supporting ModPo in a myriad ways. And, you already have a degree from the University of Pennsylvania, but I would like us to unanimously consent to granting her an honorary degree, which the president who's next door can sign the document. Right? She would, right? Okay. All in favor of Mandana Chaffa, getting an honorary degree in ModPo and the Kelly Writers House at the University of Pennsylvania, say aye. Okay, there's thousands of people all the way in New Zealand saying aye. It's 9:30 p.m. in New Zealand. Congratulations. You'll get your degree later. Phil, let's hear your question for Rae.
All right. Yes, Rae. I was looking at the poems that Al has for you in week 8 of ModPo Plus, and I'm not going to get into the content of them, the overhearing and second person.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a recreation therapist. I'm a therapeutic storyteller. Both of these poems are story poems, and to me they are deeply therapeutic. Are they therapeutic to you? Do you think poetry can be therapeutic?
Well, thank you, first of all. I think they're therapeutic to me and for me. I don't know about other people, but I often begin to write when something kind of nags at me or troubles me, puzzles me even. That's when I start writing. And the writing itself works towards a kind of pleasure. You know, for me, writing is a pleasure. And so I managed to turn whatever that nugget of pain was that started the poem into pleasure, and that's a kind of therapy.
Do you mind reading Overhearing? I have the text right in front of us. And, of course, there's a guy sitting in the sun who's in this poem, as I recall. Is that right?
Yeah, probably so.
The last time we talked about this, you were sitting in the first row, and it was a little embarrassing.
Well,
I
this
remember.
could be embarrassing, actually. Okay.
You'll have to scroll a little bit.
I know.
Yeah. This is called Overhearing.
Overhearing. The way the Tennessee Waltz is about having heard the Tennessee Waltz before. An almost floral nostalgia, totally self-contained, is what we call beautiful. You're in the rocker, I'm on the couch, long since hauled off, but stationed like organs in this dream. You're saying a bit too loudly, so that I'm afraid the one doing dishes, now dead, and the one in the bathroom, now gone, will overhear why you first wanted me. When I wake up to hear you thrashing, yelling out in a dream.
That's Overhearing. That's a memory, partly.
Yeah.
And Phil's right in assuming that there's a potential for it to be not just therapeutic for us as we do our own remembering, but for you as well as you constitute memory present and past. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, and I can actually probably fill in the actual backstory a bit more. I mean, the comment on the Tennessee Waltz is sort of about, I guess, memory and nostalgia itself, so it's a more abstract part. I heard the Tennessee Waltz at Jerome Rothenberg's house, if that matters.
It's a poetry reference.
and it is true that if it's an old song, an old country song, but its whole plot is about hearing the Tennessee Waltz, which doesn't exist except in the song. So I just thought that was interesting. But then the rest of the memory, as you call it, Al, it is a memory, is really set at my parents' house. And so, you know, I'm remembering my husband and I at my parents' house, or it's a sort of fantasy about that. And then, so the one doing dishes, now dead, would be my mother, and the one in the bathroom, now gone, it would be my father. And so, you know, in this, I don't want them to overhear what's said. And then coming out of that memory or fantasy or whatever it is an actual present tense moment of waking up because the person next to you is having a bad dream. So, you know, he, in this case, is in his own very separate reality.
Yeah, thank you. And I think Phil's instinct is exactly right there about the end. You take the parents who are now gone, a memory of them, and you are awakened by your partner, that you are parents, and there's a certain pathetic that's the wrong word, but it's kind of distressing thing when your partner for life is having a nightmare and is thrashing. It's almost a death throw that you worry about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Phil. Thank you for calling, and thanks for asking about that. Hope things
Absolutely.
are good. Hope
Thank
things
you,
are good
Al.
in Austin. All right.
Things are good.
All right. Enjoy. So the number is 610-616-3208. Lily, you are watching Facebook. Anything happening there?
Yeah. Mandana's shirt got a shout out.
We need the shirt. Okay. Do we have a way to get the shirt in, Zach, or do you have to run to do it? Oh, there it is. All right. Who wants to read it aloud? Angela, will you do the honors?
Sure. I love this shirt too. Feminism is my second favorite F word.
And Mandana said to me, she's so ridiculously radical and modest at the same time. Is this appropriate? You knew it was appropriate when you put it on this morning. Anything else on Facebook?
Sophia came
They're
back.
just talking about Mandana's shirt.
Sophia came back with the rest of the follow-up.
Oh, good. Great.
Should I read it?
Yes,
okay,
please.
Great. Sorry, my phone died, but I agree that poetry needs an element of weirdness in order to push against the accepted grain. In my work, I often include language from Urdu to disrupt the smooth surface of words we are used to in English. Most of this usage has double entendres embedded in it, so that the bilingual reader is at an advantage. It's a subtle subversion.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sophia. Okay. Twitter, what do we got? You want to riff off a few?
Yeah, Twitter is mostly full of folks being really, really excited, Rae, that you're here. And one of our longtime ModPo folks, who's a wonderful poet in her own right, named T. De Los Reyes, who's based in the Philippines, is currently in Singapore. In her modest, gentle way, did a modest and beautiful job of saying that you saved her life. So thanks.
Oh my God.
Wait, you just dropped that on us at the end there.
Well,
she said
T,
modest and
I know
gentle.
T is a huge Rae fan, but T, one of these days, I think T called us once. More than once?
T's called more than
No,
once.
she's more quick. Okay, T, call us, please. I know you're in an airport or something, but call us. Wow, that's great.
Wow,
Any other tweets you want to quote?
That's more or less what's happening on Twitter, and additionally some shout outs to Mandana's awesome shirt, and lots of folks raising their hands to confer Mandana your honorary degree.
So what I want to do now is ask a lot of you, not everybody because we don't have time, but a lot of you, to respond to the question. I'm going to start with Angela because when I said, "Oh, Angela, come, we'll do poem talk and we'll do a ModPo webcast," and then later I said, "Well, it's the beats." I don't know what. She's very polite and said, "Okay," but so you're Montreal, born and raised, okay, a translator, great poet, now in New York. I imagine that growing up in Montreal, the beats did not. Although there's a Kerouac connection. Oh my gosh, the French Kerouac. But I wouldn't think there would be a natural, person growing up in that atmosphere and then a connection to the beats. So what do you think? I want to go around really and get a lot of views. Can't wait to hear what Rae says about this. I know what Lily says about it, but I still want to hear.
Sorry, Anna and I are covering up with a blankie because it's a little colder.
Okay. But I'm just curious to know, are the beats relevant? When rereading them to prepare for today, did you have a new view? Which one of them stands up? And you don't have to mention which ones don't, but what do you think? You want to riff on the beats for a second?
I think that the beats are relevant everywhere, dare I say, where people are reading in English. I loved the performance, the Jane Cortez performance, and the Anne Waldman performance as well. I've read some Kerouac, but I actually also appreciated reading that piece on spontaneity, and I thought about Frank O'Hara, whose work I like too, and his thoughts on spontaneity. And I was scrolling through your website, and I noticed you had a conversation about whether it's possible to write spontaneously or not, which I thought was a great question.
Yeah.
Very difficult question to answer.
Is it?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think any of us think so, but we certainly like thinking about it. Okay, who wants to...
We have a lot more questions in the forums if you want to go there.
No, but I want to go around a little more on reactions to beats generally. Erica Kaufman, when we say beats, what do you think?
I think about Ginsberg.
Why?
And I also think about using the poem as, an activist tool.
Can you say a little more about? Yeah, I mean, one of the ways we get to Waldman is to think about that great collaboration between Ginsberg and Waldman, which produced an alternative university, for one thing. And just the idea of the reading and the performance, they weren't solely responsible for it, but the two of them were kind of programmatically active to make mass readings, political rally readings, and so forth. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I think about this decision to make this decision to kind of bring everything into the poem with a certain level of urgency. And also, and I'm thinking specifically about somebody like Anne Waldman, to use the poem as a way to respond to everything that's happening around you all the time.
Yes.
Like Rogue State's a reaction to Bush. Her newest book, which is fantastic, Trickster Feminism, is a response to protests since 2016. So these are ways of grappling with the world around you, and also kind of taking poetry out of the realm of the elite. And I'm also thinking about something that Anne Waldman says that comes from Pound, which is poetry is news that stays news.
Right. Fantastic. Okay, Rae and Amber Rose, what I'm going to do is read you 3 of the items in the list of Kerouac, Belief and Technique for Modern Prose. I'm going to read 3 of them and ask you just to react to any of it, okay? Number 8, write what you want bottomless from bottom of mind. 9, the unspeakable visions of the individual. 10, no time for poetry, but exactly what is. The reason I picked those 3 is that could have been written by an early 20th century modernist. It could be it could be promulgated by a conceptualist. It could be promulgated by a performance poet. So it's not just somebody writing on the road. Okay, so Rae first. Write what you want, bottomless from bottom of mind, the unspeakable visions of the individual, and no time for poetry, exactly what is. Does any of that interest you?
Well, all of it interests me, and I, feel some affinity with all of it too, although it's also not very specific, so it's easy to feel an affinity.
What, Kerouac, unspecific? If somebody comes up to you and says, Rae, I really admire your poetry because it makes me think that we shouldn't be just doing poetry, we should be doing what is. In other words, that's Kerouacian for reality is more important than poetry about reality.
Well, I have a slightly different take on it. I'm interested in poetry, in at least in my own writing, that's kind of permeable, that takes account of what's happening around it, of what's happening now.
Right.
That is about the world and doesn't start with specifically being about the self, although you really ultimately can't separate the two. And you can interpret what he said in something like that way.
Amber Rose, the unspeakable visions of the individual. Unspeakable is a really interesting word there because it's meant to give, you're giving me an expression. It's meant to give, to convey the idea that there are things that we're normally not supposed to talk about, and poetry has always been one of those places where we should avoid doing unspeakable things because, of course, that would challenge language. So much of modern and contemporary poetry is about speaking the unspeakable. Does that appeal to you as a concept?
Yeah, it does appeal to me, and I think what are these 3? What does he call them?
The title of it is, it's Belief and Technique for Modern Prose, and I believe this was published in the New American Poetry, kind of a major document of 1960.
Okay, yeah. What that makes me think about is that I think a lot of poetry, and especially modernist poetry for sure, is about trying to find ways to speak things that are unspeakable. And so that for me lends itself to thinking about what the poem can do that the essay can't do, or what the poem can do that the lecture can't do, or that we can't do in other forms, which is to kind of pull apart language, or to mess with it, to turn it on its head, so that it can kind of expose itself for what it can and cannot say, which I think is sort of related to the first one, which is speaking bottomless from the bottom. That to me just makes me think a lot about surrealism and this idea of like going to an unconscious place that even you might not realize that you can go, but letting those words be bottomless and kind of break open to things that we might not expect them to do.
Yeah. And bottom of mind also implies a hierarchy, that there are things that are higher, of higher minds, higher thoughts, as opposed to bottom. And, you know, Kerouac is hardly alone in modern poetry, modern writing, trying to get us to flip the hierarchy or explore what's supposedly at the bottom. Remove literary, grammatical, and syntactical inhibition. Jason, briefly on that, and then do we have somebody on the phone? We'll go to the forums, 610-616-3208, and we'll go to the forums. Jason, remove literary, grammatical, and syntactical inhibition. You weren't there, but on Monday, Amber Rose, at the end of our graduate seminar, our ModPo grad seminar, went on what I think she would positively, embracingly call a rant.
A performative rant.
A performative rant about, a minute ago she talked about lecture. Did you say lecture? Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lecture in the essay.
Yeah. So, you know, I want to extend that to include the rant, the performed rant, which was about university education and what is typically said there, which is not, let's say, typically the unspeakable visions of the individual in a grad seminar. And if we extend it that far, we get to education, institutions, socialization of children, and all those are our favorite topics. So I invite you to associate that, because I can see the way your mind is working, with this idea of Kerouac's, which is not unique, of removing grammatical, syntactical, and literary inhibitions.
Well, we have to think about what an inhibition is. And I'd say that most formal education is about the inhibition of the body at the and somehow splitting the body from the mind.
Wow. Wait a minute. Say that again. Education.
Most education
is about splitting the body from the mind. In other words, you come into a classroom and you're not a body anymore, you're a mind.
Right, or the body is contained by the desk or the chair.
Sure. And are you saying that poetry offers a potential remedy to that split?
Certainly the beats are trying to.
Oh, man, what an interesting conception of the beats. Damn, you're good. Okay, well, let's go. Thank you, Jason. Let's go to the thread. And this time, I want the mic, Jason, to go to the second row of all these grad student types. Give it to India. Hi, India. And whatever it is, India and Angela and Dave will respond. Whatever it is. Isn't this fun? This is such fun.
I think Dave in particular is going to really like this question.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I ruined me and Lily's blob
okay.
body.
We've got a little.
We have more than one blanket, you know.
This is more fun.
It's a well-resourced
Way more fun.
institution here
All
with
right.
blankets. We don't have a room indoors, but we have blankets.
You done?
I'm trying to be hepped up because it's beat week.
It's beat week.
Hey, I forgot to wear my beret.
Oh, dang. We're all wearing black. Oh, no. A lot of us are wearing black.
Be ideal.
Will you bring a beret next Monday? Because I'll wear what I wore her scarf.
That was a look.
That was good.
Yeah, that was a real mood. All right. Martin Rex Porter.
Oh,
asks,
Martin. He's
yeah,
cool.
It's a great question. Does satire necessarily tell us more about the satirized or the satirist?
Okay,
For
you know-
example,
yeah.
does traveling across the yard in week 5 reflect a more intolerant
Do you wanna see it?
stylistic stance in Rae Armentrout's poem than Stafford does? Similarly, does week 6 Helen Adams' poem Cheerless Junkie Song more reflect disillusion in her own situation than in the perceived lost beat dream? And I would certainly add Creeley's I Know a Man to that list as a potential satire of the beat dream.
All right, India's giving me a look like, what the hell? There's a lot of references I don't know. So repeat the first question, and I promised it was going to be Dave, India, and Angela. And Dave should start because Dave's thought a lot about the Toad poem, which we get accused of being anti-Toad, when in fact I think it's Richard Wilbur who's anti-Toad. That's the problem with that. Right. So repeat the question about satire, and then I'm going to make sure that Rae sees the text of the response to William Stafford, which has become notorious around here. Go ahead.
I think maybe I'll just honor Martin's great question by including those poems as potential examples of satire, but also open the question up to think about satire and how it's functioning this week sort of generally. Because I think we do see satire here more than we've seen it in other weeks of the course. It kind of makes a debut, as it were.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dave Poplar, can you respond to the question first while India thinks of something to say?
I honestly have no idea how to respond to that question.
Okay, what do you think of the Wilbur poem at this point, 8 years later?
I was never a huge fan of that Wilbur poem. I liked Cottage Street 1953 much more.
Okay. All right.
I don't know. There's so much to say about that question. I mean, especially the question, what is more poignant about satire, the thing being satired, or does it say something about the satirist herself? And I don't know. It could go either way depending on the satire, the work of satire itself. So I don't know. There's so much there. I don't know where to begin.
Okay. India, I know you have something to say. I just want to frame this a little bit. I have said many times in the ModPo context that one of the reasons why I admire modernism is that it moved away from what might be called Augustan 18th century style satire of an ironic distance between the subject and the object. So the object is usually made small. And the subject is all-knowing and all-powerful speaker. And in the genius theory of modernism, you get Stein doing that occasionally. You certainly get Hemingway does it. You certainly get Pound doing it in that poem, The Encounter, right? And that you create an irony and a satire. As soon as modernism, then the war, and then the 50s, and you get someone like Wilbur, who is a political liberal, but a conservative poet, who sees the Toad and decides to do a satire of suburbanism at the expense of the Toad. Williams, for all of his flaws, would not do that. Williams would see a little something, a little nothing, a broken glass, and would treat it as the most sacred potential thing with brightness. And I see that, and then the poets of Rae's community and generation, while they brought back humor, and Rae is a very funny poet, I don't think they bring back that kind of from on high satire. And one of the reasons I think you hated William Stafford's poem about the dead doe in the highway, is because you thought he was doing that again, that Faustian, Wilburian thing of like, oh, there's a doe, it's a thing, and I, the speaker, need to take responsibility for it. So I think that's what's at stake here. The end of on high poet satire at the expense of toads and glass and dead does. So India, Angela, and then Rae, we could talk about this poem. India, how are you doing?
Yeah, sure. I know that some people read that poem as well as being non-satirical, and I think we had a debate about that in our class as well. But no, I think it probably is. But I suppose we also called on the distinction between satire and parody, and the beats being not kind of normally considered to be comical. And then I was thinking about what I really wanted to ask you about was that I Know a Man, those different readings of I Know a Man, and the laughter that came in that one reading of it
at Harvard.
At Harvard, and also the laughter that came at the end of Rogue State, which, I mean, it is a funny poem, but how does that impact your perception of the poem? And for Rae Armentrout as well, is that, do you ever have people laughing at your poems and considering them satirical when they aren't?
When they aren't.
Or vice versa?
Well, I never mind when people laugh, because that people laugh for all sorts of reasons. They laugh if they're uncomfortable, for instance. They laugh if they're surprised. So it means they're paying attention and they're having a reaction. So I kind of like it when people laugh when I'm. So if you're at my reading,
laugh.
You know what to do.
Rae is very funny. I actually, Lily can swear by this. Don't think I've ever referred in a ModPo webcast to something I have written. I don't do that very often, right? Okay, good. I have written an essay about phonotextuality, actually paraphonotext, about the audio text. And I have a couple of pages on Rae's readings from Pen Sound over the years, the same poem. In fact, this one.
Oh.
And when she read it the first time in New York at a Segway series reading, that all of her friends were at. You could actually hear Charles Bernstein's laugh, and for the archive know that it was Charles sitting in the first row. There was this knowing rebuke of William Stafford, who is a poet, for better or worse, that this community of colleagues, and she's coming from the West Coast, it was fairly early in your career, there are all these New York people, and you're connecting with your New York colleagues, whom you've probably known but didn't know well, and you read this poem, and there was a kind of laughter of, we get this, we know this stance, ha, ha, ha. And then there are other readings where she reads the poem and people are like, oh, she's really beating up on William Stafford. I don't think I don't, because he read here last week. And I have a whole 2 pages on laughing in response to Rae, in response to performance. Pretty good topic. Angela, back to the question of satire. What do you think?
Actually, can I would like to hear, can Rae read the poem?
Yeah.
Sure.
I guess should we do the
We should do the Stafford
originally?
too, because I was following him kind of grammatically and, following him pretty closely.
So here's Rae Armentrout actually, it's saying that it can't open it. Let's try it again. Here's Rae Armentrout reading William Stafford's Traveling Through the Dark. It's kind of a long poem.
Yeah.
But I don't mind saying an awful poem.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Did I say that? Is he still around? I think he is.
I don't think so.
I feel bad.
Traveling through the dark, I found a deer, dead on the edge of the Wilson River Road. It is usually best to roll them into the canyon. That road is narrow. To swerve might make more dead. By glow of the taillight, I stumbled back of the car and stood by the heap, a doe, a recent killing. She had stiffened already, almost cold. I dragged her off. She was large in the belly. My finger touching her side brought me the reason. Her side was warm. Her fawn lay there waiting, alive, still, never to be born. Beside that mountain road, I hesitated. The car aimed ahead its lowered parking lights. Under the hood purred the steady engine. I stood in the glare of the warm exhaust, turning red. Around our group, I heard the wilderness listen. I thought hard for us all, my only swerving, then pushed her over the edge into the river.
So while I get to to Rae's poem, I'll just specify we're talking about a dead, pregnant female animal that he throws.
Pushes off a narrow mountain road.
Pushes off a narrow mountain road because he's got to get through.
Yeah.
Okay. So now here's Rae. That's the one right there. Here's Rae's response that has caused so much controversy in not a lot of controversy, but people are like, oh, ew, you're so mad.
Well, I'm.
You are. It's okay.
I'll just read my poem first, and then I'll talk about it a little bit. Traveling through the yard, it was lying near my back porch in the gaudy light of morning, a dove corpse, oddly featherless, alive with flies. I stopped, dustpan in hand, and heard them purr over their feast. To leave that there would make some stink. So thinking hard for all of us, I scooped it up, heaved it across the marriage counselor's fence.
You got the laughter there. Before Rae comments, Angela, you brought this up. What do you think? What's going on? And this question of satire, which is Martin's question, is really relevant here.
My other question is, when you read that poem, does everyone know that you're satirizing William Stafford's poem?
Well,
I think she usually says it.
It says,
yeah.
And it also pretty much, his title is Traveling Through the Dark, and mine is Traveling Through the Yard. So if people are familiar with his poem, they get it.
But I think in almost every instance on Pen Sound, you talk about the Stafford poem.
Yeah.
So you help us.
That's always the risk of doing satire, is that no one will realize that's what you're doing, and they'll think that your voice is sincere, right? Yeah.
Well, I take it as almost, we put it in the Frost section of ModPo Plus because Stafford is being Frostian. And Frost does that. I think last week I talked about, it was when Ray Maxwell was here, I think. We talked about an almost imprisoning iambic quality to the mending wall. You just can't get at. I mean, the wall is partly that iambic pentameter, which has, let's just say, literary historical specificity. So when Rae does, to leave that there would make some stink. She is doing a satire that is not just about Stafford's iambic macho-ness.
His goes to leave that there would make more dead. And, but, you know, yeah, so he had to push the deer over. It's kind of a faux choice that he's dramatizing. But I think the thing that irked me about the Stafford poem was the way he was thinking hard for all of us.
Yeah.
And the way that and also, but even more than that, the wilderness listens to him. The wilderness listened. No, it didn't. I'm sorry.
But this is but Rae, this represents one of the reasons why it's so, pardon me, teachable, right? It's so perfect for ModPo Plus in the Frost context. It's because there is a divide. I mean, two roads in a wood. There's a divide here. And you and your colleagues, experimental poets, language poets, your generation, people who grew up who came of age in the 60s politically, all that stuff that's been said so much about that generation of avant-gardism, this is the crux of the difference, which is to say, do not speak for all of us.
Yeah.
And don't drag along iambic pentameter as evidence that you know what you're talking about automatically.
Well, yeah, and I wanted to say that my objections to that poem are not merely stylistic. I mean, I see my poem as a kind of, in a way, a sort of feminist response. I mean, the speaker in my poem, it has a dustpan in her hand, and she's in her own place trying to clean up.
And it's the marriage counselor's fence.
Yeah. Well, I got that idea because we actually at that point lived next to a marriage. I did not, and I really did,
did it
find.
Help your marriage
I did
to live
find.
next to a marriage
I did find a dead dove. Might have been a pigeon in reality, but anyway, I didn't throw it over his fence. But that's what actually sort of triggered the poem, was thinking, oh, this is like the Stanford situation, but not.
I think it's a really interesting thing to have this argument, maybe too strong a word for it, to have this discussion. In ModPo Plus, there is a video recording of a 1-hour debate on Frost's Mending Wall. I was the moderator. And on the left were Bob Perlman and Rachel Blau Duplessis, expressing a lot of criticism and skepticism of that poem. And on the right were two of our friends, Philadelphia friends, fine poets who were taking what amounts to the conservative poetics point of view. And it was a fascinating 1-hour conversation. Got a little heated at the end, but mostly we get to disagree. And I think, not to be too cliche pedagogically, but teaching the conflicts is one way to understand where poetry has gone, and to have the Stafford poem next to your poem and all of the ancillary materials, including a video of our conversation about this poem when you were Writers' House Fellow, is simply good, and people can decide for themselves. Okay, what we're going to do now is we are going to get final words. We're going to wrap up. We're going to get a lot of final words, so you got to be brief. Everybody gets a final thought. So let's start with Dave Poplar. Sorry, Dave, I didn't warn you. It can be anything that you've wanted to say about the Beats this week, or about ModPo, where we are, or Ballyhoo, the office hour, or a book, whatever. We'll start with Dave. We'll go to Anna next.
Just to say that I'm looking forward to next week, too, to the New York School. And I really would love to talk about Barbara Guest's 20.
That's such a good poem.
Get more into that.
Okay, Barbara Guest 20, everybody. Read that poem. It's very difficult. Thank you, Dave. And thanks for joining us this morning. Anna?
I just wanted to say that there's one more really great question in the forums from ModPo pal Shirley Collins, who was really interested in the relationship between music and Kerouac, specifically in October on the Railroad Earth, in that sort of prose piece, poemy prose piece.
Which is backed by Steve Allen on the piano, I think.
Yeah. It's a great piece. So if you are interested in kind of having a conversation about that in the forums, start a thread and let's talk about music and the beats. Let's look at Clark Coolidge and Mary Baraka, and there's all kinds of good stuff to talk about there.
Great. Thank you so much, Anna. Lily, final thought, and then we'll go to Angela.
I'm thinking about what Erica said earlier about the beats and Ginsberg and others this week showing a model for explicit political activism in poetry. And it's kind of interesting to think about this week coming after the communist poets of last week. And, I just think about how I may not agree with, a lot of the hyper-masculinist, energy of a lot of the poems this week, but there is so much energy to the political message that is sort of intellectualized in a way in some of the poetry from last week, where it's not to say one's better than the other, but it's just such different strategies for conveying strong political content in a poem. And I think it's interesting to talk more about that in a course sense of putting those in conversation. So look forward to doing more of that on the forums or in office hours if anyone's interested.
Thank you, Lily. Angela, thank you so much for joining us today. What did you expect this to be?
No, it's wonderful. I'd love to do this every week. It's fun.
Would you? Well, let's talk. Anyway, final thoughts about the beats or about anything, poetry?
Well, you asked whether the beats were relevant in Montreal, and I guess I didn't really address the fact that a lot of their work is so socially specific, right? The references, the historical references, but I think the energy or the urgency of the countercultural movement is relevant.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely relevant.
I realized I didn't address that, that was really fascinating to hear your take on and your argument with William Stafford's wilderness, right? He's civilization and yeah.
And raising a yard with a fence and a dove.
Right.
And proud of it. Yeah. Amber Rose, will you do a final word next, and then Davey?
I thought Davey was going to go first.
That's okay.
Funny.
We'll reverse that because Davey's sort of ever ready.
I wanted to shout out all of the awesome feminist poets in Beat Week, and particularly Elise Cowan's Emily, which is an awesome poem.
Isn't it?
And there's so many great feminist poets in Beat Week who are engaging in a kind of double refusal, a refusal of the cultural expectations that are important to the beats, that singular refusal, and then a refusal of their masculinist modes of expression in some of the dominant beat poetry, and that double refusal makes for poems that are really formally different from one another but politically pretty aligned. Yes. And there's a great range of folks doing that work in Week 6 and in ModPo Plus, and you should check it out.
And to be specific, we have in ModPo and ModPo Plus Ann Waldman, Jane Cortez, Maggie Estep, Helen Adam, Elise Cowan, Ruth Weiss, Joanne Kiger. And there's obviously plenty more. Amber Rose, thank you for doing the phones today.
Yes, it was very nice doing the phones today.
The headphones really become you.
Now they're just keeping my ears warm. Okay, so my final word is actually a shout out to Davey.
We should do that every week.
Great.
Davey's the best.
But also because Davey has been running this really, really, really spectacular series called City Planning Poetics.
Yeah.
And he has an event next week on Tuesday at 6. The poet Doug Kearney is going to be in conversation with the geographer Brian
Goldstein.
So yeah, if you're around and want to be a part of that great curated conversation, please do at 6 on Tuesday.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Amber Rose.
I'd like to get a final word from Allie Castleman, and then let's get the mic to Michael Shea, who gets a final word. Hi, Allie.
Hi. I'm teaching freshman comp, and we just read a piece called Commodify Your Dissent, which is basically about how big corporations have usurped the language of the counterculture, particularly the beats, in selling their products. And so I've kind of been in that mindset, and it's very nice to get back to the actual beats and read their poetry and just engage with what is actually being said and the actual ideology there.
That's great. You remember that? I'm sure you studied it. That's Gap, the khakis ads, the print ads. I think it was Gap, right? Photos of Kerouac looking good in khakis. Thank you, Allie. Thanks for joining us, too. Thanks for all you do for ModPo. Michael Shea, followed by Connie. Final word, Michael? Hi.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just...
We're looking at a fire hydrant. No, a fire extinguisher. But that's a metaphor. There's... No, that's Chris. That's Chris. There's Michael Shea. Hey.
I guess I would just sort of echo Allie in that this week was sort of coming back to the beats for me, who I hadn't thought about or read, God, years now. And it was enjoyable and also sort of complicating, all that, like Davey expressed it really well, the masculinity of their vision, of their sort of modes, very appropriative. And, it was an interesting experience this week, but I'm also looking forward, as someone else said, to New York School and looking at sort of a complication on sort of that same sort of countercultural moment. So
fantastic. Thank you, Michael. Connie, and then Jason, Mandana, and Rae, and then I'll wrap up. Hi, Connie.
Hi. I guess I'm just kind of thinking of one of the emails you had sent out this week from a ModPoer who had said she thought the Kerouac, I think, rules of spontaneous prose really annoyed her. And I thought that was really funny because the first time I read that, it didn't really annoy me per se. I didn't feel any contempt towards it or anything, but I understood where she was coming from because I don't think, as someone mentioned earlier, that our writing is mostly done with spontaneity, even though we try to do it spontaneously. So I think I was just thinking about that most of the time.
That's really good. I mean, there's a basic paradox, Connie, in Jack Kerouac saying, you've got to be spontaneous. Here are the essentials, 16 of them. I shall enumerate. I mean, with all due respect, he was asked to do that, and he probably would prefer not to do that and just to do it, to write. But anyway, he did say that. Jason, Mandana, Rae Armentrout, and then me. And I don't think I've left anybody out. I may have, but I've left Jamie out. But he's happy, and India is happy. Jason, hello. How are you?
Reading the work of this week again really brought forward to me is the, like if Pound would say make it new, the Beats would say make it now. And so that I really was reading the Beats work as script for performance rather than as visual words on a page.
Very good. No, I think that's a really good point. Mandana, before we get to you, Erica Kaufman, sorry, I forgot you. I'd love a final word from you up there in the Hudson Valley.
So my final word is two very short parts. First is, as we were talking about before, the beats and pedagogies is something really rich to talk about, and I have office hours tomorrow morning at 10 Eastern time, and I would be really excited to talk about that. And I would also urge folks to check out Bob Kaufman's jail poems, which are absolutely amazing.
Thank you. And your office hours are always happening. Amazing. Thank you. Mandana, final thought?
Since Erica had two, I'm going to have two as well. First of all, if you're in New York City on Saturday, Rae is going to be at the Zinc Bar talking about her book Wobble.
At 4:30
to 6:30, and it will be wonderful. You should come because I'll be there too. Second is that, we're in the middle of week 6. A lot of people may have fallen off, may feel like they're behind, and the point is you are never, ever behind in ModPo. So catch up, find a poem, and since you have 3.5 weeks left, Here's one task that you can do for yourself. Any poem you like, any thought you have that's interesting, start a new thread. It's easy, and people will be more than happy to talk with you about whatever it is you want to talk about. Do that before the end of ModPo.
Thank you, Mandana, and thanks for making the trip today. Rae Armentrout, final thoughts? Thank you again. The book is Wobble, Wesleyan University Press. It's about to win a giant prize, but even if it doesn't, it's a finalist, and that matters because it's going to get a sticker, I think, because of that.
Yeah.
And also,
also
Angela's here and there is a copy of one of her books that we have here. And is it easy to get? Because I had no problem. It's Book Thug, which we don't say anymore. We say Book Hug. We got the thug out of. That's a whole story. Okay. Rae, final thoughts? Thank you again for coming.
Yeah, I remember reading Howl for the very first time when I was a sophomore.
You want to say what year that was?
That was that was in the 60s. And my professor, I think, was quite bold, probably, to actually assign it back then. And
It was
I remember.
at Berkeley or San Francisco State?
I actually transferred to Berkeley from San Diego State, and it was back in San Diego. And I was really taken by the rhythm of it, which I'm just going to read one line from it.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
Maybe 2 or 3.
Who poverty and tatters and hollow-eyed and high sat up smoking in the supernatural darkness of cold water flats. It's very propulsive, it's very emphatic. A lot of those words I notice have stress on the first syllable. Poverty, tatters, hollow. And he does that a lot. And it's not enough, it's not regularly enough to be a traditional meter like trochees, but there are a lot of trochees in it. If once you learn that terminology, you recognize them. But I just responded, instinctively, you could almost dance to it. And I think that meant that I was going to be a poet. The fact that I responded not so much, I responded to what it was saying, its sort of liberating message, but at a basic level, I responded to the rhythm.
That's really cool. I'm so glad that the invitation for you to come here coincided with the beat so that you could say that about Ginsberg. I mean, back in 1999, we asked you to come and pick one poet who was your progenitor, main influence, and you picked Dickinson, and you did a great talk on Dickinson, which I think is in ModPo Plus somewhere. And now here you are all these years later also saying that Ginsberg is back there. That's really fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, I have 3 shout-outs, and then I'm going to say thank you to the people around here for all the great work you do. First, to Divya Sachdeva, who's very involved this year. Divya is really into the Baroness Elsa von Freytag-Loringhoven, and she asked me recently in the forums about how she could read more, and I told her about a collection, a bare collection, because there's still a lot of the Baroness that's never been published, called Body Sweats. And today, a few hours ago, she reported that she had bought a copy of Body Sweats and was going to be reading it. And I just think I could just fold up shop right now and quit. That, someone out there who'd never heard of the Baroness has just bought the poems and is reading the Baroness. Yeah. An update on Adam Birnbaum's 13-year-old daughter, who, out of respect, because she hasn't been named, we're not going to name her, but she is this kind of hero of ModPo. Remember last week that she was sort of responding to Stein. And the update is, I asked him more about how she's doing with the poetry. He says she's really not ready for Howl, or maybe he as a dad is thinking that, sex and drugs. So while I've been absorbed by that, I think she should wait maybe another few years, he says 5 years, before confronting the peyote and other stuff. And Kerouac I'm just not that enthusiastic about. I have this impression that Kerouac was overconfident, without the same depth of reading as Ginsberg. Is that unjust of me? The other thing is she's very sensitive about gender voices in literature and always has been. It's developed from there's not girls in this one to more advanced versions of it, like in this summer's endless rants about the hideous gendered vision in her school's assigned summer reading, Lord of the Flies, oh my God, which she found to be disgusting, manipulative, and false. In any case, I'm pretty sure that there's something about the tone of Ginsberg and Kerouac that would strike her as not quite right. But I think she's going to be really, really, really loving Anne Waldman. I put a copy of Fast Speaking Woman. I'm a shouting woman. I'm a speech woman. I'm an atmosphere woman. in her hands just today, and she immediately got sucked right in. Right on, sister, but had to stop because she gets carsick. And we were on the way to her dance class, suburban, highbrow Jane of all arts that she is. Trickster feminism is on order. That's Adam Birnbaum and his 13-year-old who's sort of taken ModPo. And finally, a shout out to Benita Cape. So Benita posted to the haiku group that she has taken ill. She's in the hospital. The doctors are worried that it's something major, so she's checking it out, and she's sort of out of touch. I sent her an email, and I just want to, when she sees this recording, I just want you to know, Benita, that we're thinking of you. We want you to get well. We want you to come back to ModPo. Let us know when you're feeling better, and if there's anything that we could do or say to help you, we want to do that. So thank you to everybody. Anna, Davey, Lily, Amber Rose, standing in the sun, Allie, Erica. Erica, thank you so much for everything you do. Thank you. Have fun up there at BARD.
Wonderful to see all of you.
Yeah.
Hi, Rae. Hi, Mandana.
Dave Poplar, thank you so much. Sophia, Phil, Martin for the question. Chuck for hanging out there in the sun, although the sun's gone away. It's more like Seattle now. Connie, Mandana, thank you for coming. Susan, who was somewhere who didn't get to say anything. Jason, as usual. India, Michael, Sophia, Angela, once again. Davey, thank you. Always, always, always. And Rae Armentrout. Come tonight or watch us tonight, 6 p.m., KWH TV. And otherwise, we will see you next week for the New York Schools. Signing off.